Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd Family part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. If you jump on here live, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Make sure you give the video a like, a thumbs up. If you have not yet subscribed, please do so. It takes about 2 seconds and it helps the channel out tremendously. But I wanted to come on here and talk some college football. I'm going to mention, just very briefly, mention a little bit about the transfer portal and a little bit about the early national signing day, which was today, but not a whole lot because the big overall national signing day, of course, as always, is the first Wednesday in the month of February. But my main topic tonight is the college football playoff poll that came out last night. Of course, it's the last one that we'll see until Sunday. And of course, the one that comes out on Sunday will be the final deciding factor on which 12 teams go to the playoffs. But Oregon, obviously, they're the only undefeated team. Number one, number two, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Georgia round out the top five. We have Ohio State, Tennessee, SMU, Indiana, and Boise State, 6 through 10, Alabama, Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Arizona State, number 15, Iowa State, Clemson, BYU, Missouri, and UNLV sits at number 20. And then we have Illinois, Syracuse, Colorado, Army, and Memphis rounding out the top 25. Now, a lot of people think if Clemson wins Saturday, which for the record, let me say that I don't think they will, but for the sake of argument, let's say that Clemson does win Saturday. A lot of people think if Clemson wins Saturday, they're going to get a top 4 seed, but that's not a guarantee. Hey there, Burn Thy Priest. Glad you're here with us, because the top 4 seeds get a first round bye, but Oregon, if they win, which I think they will, going to be number 1. Hey there, Andrew. Glad to have you here. Number 2 is either going to be Texas or Georgia, whoever wins that game. If Boise State wins, they're going to be the 3 seed. The 4th seed will either be Clemson or the winner of the Big 12 championship, which is either going to be Arizona State or Iowa State, which right now both of those teams are ranked ahead of Clemson. So whoever wins that game, we have no way of knowing that they're going to pass that team. Because, first of all, whoever wins that game, whether it's Arizona State or Iowa State, they both only have 2 losses, and Clemson has 3. So they could go with Arizona State or Iowa State, whoever wins, because they have fewer losses. They could go with Clemson because Clemson's win would be over a top 10 team, whereas the Big 12 winner is only going to be the top 15 or top 16 team. So there's no guarantee that if Clemson does win, they're going to be a top 4 seed, but I don't think it matters because I think SMU is going to beat Clemson. Hopefully I'm wrong. That's just my prediction as we sit here on this Wednesday night. But it could go a variety of ways because Boise State plays UNLV. So if UNLV wins that game, Boise State gets knocked out, and then UNLV will all of a sudden be a playoff team. Will they get a top 4 seed? Are they going to go from 20 all the way to the top 4? Sports and Beats, I just said that I think SMU will beat Clemson. I hope I'm wrong. I want to be wrong. But when I'm here on the channel, I tell things the way I think they're going to happen and not what I want to happen, because obviously I want Clemson to win, but they just haven't proven to me they can consistently score against good teams. And you're not going to beat SMU by scoring 14 points, 17 points. So if I had to make a score prediction, I'll say SMU wins. It'll be close, but I'll say SMU wins something like 24-21, 27-21, 24-17. It'll be a 7 to 10 point game. I think Clemson hangs around, but unless they get points on defense, I just don't see them winning. SMU's offense is too good. You're not going to beat them by scoring 20 points. Hey there, Nicole. Glad to have you here. So it could go a variety of ways, but anybody that follows the channel, I've said on here since I started this channel that I don't care nothing about conferences. The conference talk to me is something a 5-year-old child would say. You get mad because your team gets beaten. You say, well, we played a tough conference. Grown men don't make excuses on things like that. People only say stuff like that because their team couldn't win. And instead of them coming out and saying, hey, we got beat, their fallback excuse is, well, our conference is good. And I bring that up because tonight at church I was talking to a buddy of mine that I go to church with named Michael, and him and I were talking about it. He said after last night's rankings, he's done watching the playoff committee because what they say is confusing. It always changes. And I said, well, Michael, I ain't watched 1 second of the playoff polls. I wait till 9 or 9:30 whenever I get a chance. I'll get on Google and find the top 12. It'll tell me. I ain't got to watch and see what they're going to say because it'll give you a headache. It'll make you pull your hair out because they change what they say on a weekly basis based on what they want to see. And I told him that they better be glad that I'm not on the committee, because if I was on the committee, I wouldn't give a darn what conference you're in. I don't care about your brand. I don't care about your logo. I don't care about your fan base. I don't care about your history. If I was on the committee and I had a vote, any team that has one loss would automatically go in over a team that has 2 losses. Any team that has 2 losses would go in over a team that has 3 losses. Because having a season where you only lost once is better than a season where you lost twice. Having a season where you lost twice is better than losing 3 times. And it would suck. Hey there, Jeremy. Glad to have you here. It would suck to be a coach when you're supposed to want your team to go out there and win, to tell your team, well, we'll go out there and we win, but I don't know what we get out of it, but hopefully it'll be good, but let's just go out there and win. Hey there, Matthew. Glad to have you here on this Wednesday night, because the point of the game is supposed to be to win the game. And if you're going to tell a team, well, you went 11-1, but it just wasn't good enough, then to me, there's no point in keeping track with wins and losses and keeping track with who won the game, because it don't matter. You're putting teams in the playoff based on their brand, their logo, their history, and it's not right. Sports Beat says they play 2 different quarterbacks, Kevin Jennings and Preston Stone. They will play 2, but Kevin Jennings is their main quarterback, and I expect he will get the majority of the snaps on Saturday night, barring some kind of injury to Jennings, because when the season started, Jennings was not their quarterback. He was the backup. But as the season progressed, he became the starter, and their offense has looked way better with him as a starter. But the whole reason I brought up the whole wins and losses thing is because Michael is upset about Alabama going to make the playoffs. I said, Michael, I told you back in July, Bama can go 7-5, and they're going to be in the playoffs. So I don't really see why anybody's, out of the blue shocked about it when you should have expected this, because they're Alabama. The only way this stops is they're going to have a few seasons of 6-6, 7-5, 5-7, 4-8, where we see that Alabama's history is out the window and they're no longer that dominant team. Until we get there, if there's ever a benefit of the doubt, Alabama is going to get it. And it's all about eyeballs, because this day and time, with the money they spend in college football, they don't want to have a whole entire season go by and then come playoff time, you've got 12 teams in there that nobody's heard of. You're going to put in the blue bloods, the teams that people will watch. Matthew, I would love to be at Nerd U Saturday, but my church is actually going to a Christmas light festivity Saturday night, which is good because Nerd U has not contacted me, unfortunately, so I'd have to back out of the booking. I would love to have been there, but I have not talked to anybody, and now my church has decided we're going to look at Christmas lights. That's where I will be on Saturday. I know my kids, they're at that age where anytime there's Christmas lights or Christmas decorations or snow or anything, they want to be a part of it. And my kids are not going to stay small forever, so I want to help them enjoy that. But thank you for asking, Matthew. Maybe next time Nerd U has a show, they will actually contact me. I would love to work for them again in the future. And Jeremy, to answer your question, I am 75 years old. Not that it matters, but we were talking about Alabama. He said it's not fair that Bama, gets in. And I said, well, they're a blue blood. They're going to get the benefit of the doubt all the time. And it's not fair, but it's the way that it's always going to be. And, they lost to Oklahoma, who finished 6-6. But they didn't just lose to Oklahoma. They got demolished by Oklahoma. The game was not close. The game was over at halftime, and they fell like 3 spots. And it sucks because now when they go over Bama's resume, they don't even bring up the fact that they lost to Oklahoma. You might could sell me a little bit if you went 9-3 and your losses were to Georgia, Texas, and Tennessee. But when you go 9-3 and 2 of your losses are to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, that doesn't quite seem fair, in my opinion, or anybody else's opinion. And that's why Dabo Swinney took a lot of flack a couple of weeks ago, because he said the playoff right now is a Big Ten and SEC invitational. And he's 100% correct. And that should have been said, and he's right. But everybody gets mad when he says it, but yet it's true. Bama is Bama. They're, like you're saying, a blue blood, but instead they're a red blood, but they're always going to have an electric roster. They are, and the problem with Alabama, and I told somebody at work this yesterday, is Alabama is the New York Yankees of college football. You either love them or you hate them. So when they make the playoffs, the people that love them watch to see them win, and the people that hate them watch to see them hopefully lose. But college football doesn't care why you're watching them. All they care about is the fact that you are watching them. So putting them in makes the whole country watch. So if they're on the borderline of getting in, they're going to get in. And then last night, I heard this morning that Ward Emanuel, who is pretty much over the whole playoff thing now, came out and said that if we've already evaluated you and you don't play again, we're not going to reevaluate you. So he's basically telling you, Bama right now at 11, there's no way they fall down because they don't play again. So I don't see any way Bama does not make the playoffs. And Sports and Beats, you're right. When I was talking to Michael tonight, I said, Michael, I've told you for 3 years that I didn't want the playoffs to expand because all they're going to do is continue showing favoritism to all the blue bloods. And I mentioned Texas, and I mentioned Georgia, and I mentioned Ohio State, And I mentioned Alabama, and I think I mentioned Oregon. I said those teams like that, they're the blue bloods of college football. If they're on the borderline of getting in, they're going to get in. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. They're going to get in. And to me, I think every team that has 0 losses or 1 loss should be in first. I don't give a darn about your history. I don't give a darn what conference you win. To me, wins and losses should matter. Any team that goes through the season undefeated or 1 loss should be in automatically. Otherwise, why play the games? Why keep score? If you're going to put teams in based on their history, based on their fan base, based on their brand, then just go ahead and name your playoff teams when the season starts and get it over with. Save us all the time. But the Texas Tech head coach hit the nail on the head. I'm not sure when he said it. I'm guessing he said it Saturday after their game, but I heard what he said yesterday, so I'm guessing he said it on Saturday. But he said college football, this is not word for word, but it's pretty much what he said, just not verbatim. You can go back and find it if you would like to. It was 1 minute and 43 seconds in total. Hopefully, when I said it won't take that long. But he said that college football is not treating these players fairly when you're ranking teams based on their brand and when you're ranking teams based on their conference. And he went over all 4 of the Power 4 conferences. He said, look, Oregon might win their conference the first year they're in it. Arizona State might win their conference the first year they're in it. Texas might win their conference the first year they're in it. SMU might win their conference the first year they're in it. So there's a chance that all 4 of the major conferences this year could have a champion who is winning it in their first year in the league. So basically, that's telling you that college football now, top to bottom, is pretty much an even matchup. There's not one team better than another. There's not one conference better than another. So we're not treating these teams fairly and these players fairly when we're telling them to go out there and play. But if you don't have a certain conference on your jersey or a certain brand on your jersey, it does you no good. And he is 100% right. And there is a chance that the 4 conference champions this year will be teams that were not in their conference last year. And I can remember last year when Texas had that really good season. If you recall, Texas beat Alabama last year in a non-conference game. And I can remember all the SEC fans saying, oh, Texas ain't that good. Just wait till next year when they join a real conference. They won't be that good next year. And they come in the SEC. And first year, what do? They're playing for the championship game. But now that they've went out there and proved all those doubters wrong, nobody talks about the fact that last year Georgia fans were saying that. Bama fans were saying that. Ole Miss fans were saying that. LSU fans were saying that. But I guarantee you, if Texas by some chance went 8-4 or 7-5, it'd be the talk of the town this year. I told you Texas wouldn't be no good. They're finally in a real conference. So since they proved everybody wrong, it doesn't get talked about. Sports and Beat says, even as an LSU fan, I'll admit our year sucked. And if it's just going to be favoritisms, just put Georgia, LSU, Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State should make it every year and let the rest fight last 6. And unfortunately, Sports and Beats, you're pretty spot on because I can guarantee you if Texas, Alabama, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Georgia, if those 6 teams go 10-2 or 9-3, they're going to be in the playoffs every year. Anything 9-3 or better, they're going to get in. Not a doubt in my mind. So those 6 teams are going to be in every year as long as they go 9-3. And I believe that until the playoffs expand past 12 teams, I'm not sure they're going to get in at 8-4, but at 9-3, they'll get in every year. Hey there, Jalen. Glad to have you here. What's good? Everything is good, man. Every day is a good day. No such thing as a bad day. Penn State deserved it, in my opinion. They're the most underrated 3 seed all time. Well, they're 3 seed right now, but if they by some chance beat Oregon Saturday, which I don't think they will, but if they do beat Oregon, they will probably be the number 1 overall seed, maybe number 2, depending on what Texas does. If Georgia beats Texas and Penn State beats Oregon, then I think Penn State will be the number 1 overall seed. But if Texas wins and Penn State beats Oregon, I think Texas will be the number 1 overall seed and Penn State will be number 2. But I'm just guessing because if Texas beats Georgia, they have 1 loss. And if Penn State beats Oregon, they'll have 1 loss. So you can make an argument for either team, but I think Texas will just go up 1 spot and go to number 1. But Penn State could end up being the number 1 overall seed come final bracket Sunday if they can by some chance beat Oregon on Saturday. And Penn State might be the 3rd most talented team in America from top to bottom behind Ohio State and Georgia. But it's not going to matter until James Franklin proves he can win a big game, because with that record he has against top 5 and top 10 teams, Penn State is never going to get considered a real threat until he proves he can beat a good team, because he can make the playoffs every year now. But until you start beating top 5 and top 10 teams, come playoff time, people are going to see Penn State's name and they're going to say, well, Penn State's going to get beat because they cannot beat a good team. Your top 3 college teams are LSU, Penn State, and SMU, which sounds like a bandwagon, but my family has gone to all 3, including me. Well, that's good to hear, man. You really can't say bandwagon because up until Rhett Lashley took over at SMU, they've really, for the most part, stunk it up for the last 25, 30 years. Now, they had 1 or 2 decent years under Sonny Dykes. Nothing really great, but okay. But now, back in the 80s, they were great until the death penalty. And when the death penalty came along, man, they were bad for a long time. But now they're finally in a power conference, and they've got an amazing head coach. So now they might be good for years to come. And Penn State, before James Franklin got there, they had quite a few years of being down. And LSU's always good, but they're not great. Even going back to the Les Miles years, outside of the 2019 team when they were the best team ever assembled, LSU's usually consistently an 8 or 9 win team. So they're not bad. They just can't consistently get over that hump of being an 8 or 9 win team. Kevin Jennings and Preston Stone are young. They are both very, very young. And Sports and Beat said, yeah, they got kicked out of the NCAA football from 2010 to 2016, if I remember correctly. I believe that is correct, Sports and Beat, but it's hard to keep up with it. And I don't write this stuff down, so I have to go by memorization, but that does sound correct. And a lot of folks now think South Carolina deserves a shot at the playoffs. And South Carolina might be playing the best football in the country right now. The problem is South Carolina doesn't have a rich history of winning, so they're not going to get the benefit of the doubt. And the problem is they're behind Alabama and they're behind Ole Miss. And Bama doesn't play again, and Ole Miss doesn't play again, and the Gamecocks don't play again. And Alabama beat South Carolina, and Ole Miss beat South Carolina. So When all three of those teams go 9-3, and South Carolina lost to both of them, and they lost to Ole Miss, I want to say 27-3 in Columbia. So I just don't see any way they pass Alabama or Ole Miss. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying that since they're not a brand name and they don't have that historic tradition of winning, and you lost to both teams ahead of you, and one of them you lost to pretty convincingly, I just don't see a way you're going to pass them. Thank you for subscribing, Jeremy. Tell your friends, tell your family, give the video a thumbs up, and share the video on all social media platforms. Coming up on Monday, the transfer portal will officially open. So, whatever your job is, when you get off on Monday afternoon, Monday night, whenever you get off, get on ncaa.com or one of those websites and read about it. There's probably going to be tons of players that are going to transfer. A few players have already announced their intent to transfer when it opens up on Monday, and that is Texas A&M's was starting quarterback, now backup quarterback Connor Weigman, and then Daniels, who is the starting quarterback at Stanford, Ashton Daniels. He announced he's going to transfer, and Troy Stellato at Clemson announced he is transferring. Well, that's just a few of the big names that everybody should know. There's been a few other guys, but Connor Weigman is transferring because he lost his job at A&M, and he didn't get it back, so I think he knows he's not going to start. So he's going to go where he can start. And Ashton Daniels is probably transferring for two reasons. One, Stanford is absolutely god-awful. You're not shocked these Stanford guys transferring after they lost that heartbreaking game to San Jose State. Yeah, but Ashton Daniels is transferring because, for one, Stanford is terrible. For two, he is from Buford, Georgia, and he went all the way to Palo Alto because he didn't get a lot of offers coming out of high school, and it's probably hard for him to get his family to come watch him play because they're having to travel from Buford, Georgia, all the way to California to watch him play. So he probably wants to go somewhere that's a little bit closer to home, even if he transfers to a school in Kentucky. He's a lot closer than where he is now. But the problem is, well, Stanford is terrible, so you haven't proven that you can be a winner because back-to-back years Stanford's finished 3-9, but also he's been hurt a lot. So between the fact that he's hurt a lot and the fact that Stanford sucks, I don't know if he'll get a big-time offer, but he could go to a program like Tennessee State, Tennessee Tech, Mercer, Florida A&M, Florida International, Wofford, Furman, maybe East Carolina Sports and Beats, a school like that, and do really, really good. But I don't know how many Power 4 offers he'll get, if any. I guess we'll find out. And Troy Stellato's transferring because Dabo seems pretty convinced that Antonio Williams is coming back next year. And you have Bryant Wesco, who's only a freshman. TJ Moore, who's only a freshman. Tyler Brown is back next year. And they have a freshman that's coming in this year that's supposed to be really, really good. So Troy Stellato is going to be the fifth or sixth best option in the wide receiver room. And I think he wants to go somewhere where he can be at least a 2 or 3 option. You know, Stellato the last couple of years played a lot, but the last half of this year, there were games he might play 10 snaps the whole game and get the ball thrown to him one time. Hey there, favorite brunette. Glad to have you here again. And Sports and Beat says he also likes Army. And brunette, you're right. You have not been here in a while. I've been doing a lot of videos, though I think I've posted every single day since the last time you were on, except for maybe Thanksgiving. I want to say I either skipped Thanksgiving or the day before Thanksgiving. Outside of that, I think I've posted every day since the last time you were on here. But again, wait till Monday when we'll see a ton of players hit the transfer portal. But last I checked today, the early National Signing Day period from a USA Today, Austin Curtright, his top 10 was Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, Auburn, Oregon, Michigan, LSU, Texas, and Tennessee. I'm sure you can pretty much check any other recruiting website, and they might have a little different order, but it's pretty much going to be those same 10 teams. And you're hoping that Garrett Nussmeier doesn't transfer. I don't think he will. He seems like the kind of quarterback that Brian Kelly likes to have and the kind of quarterback that fits Brian Kelly's system. But it's hard to say because if he does get an offer from a school offering a butt ton of money, there's a chance. With a lot of these players, like the guys I just mentioned that are transferring, they're transferring because either their school sucks or they want to play. But some of these guys transfer for more money. So does Garrett Nussmeier want more money or does Garrett Nussmeier want to win? That's the thing you have to look out for. But watch Ashton Daniels transfer to Notre Dame. And I say that because the last 2 years, Notre Dame had former Wake Forest quarterback Sam Hartman, and then they had former Duke quarterback this year, Riley Leonard. So if they get Ashton Daniels, it'll be their third straight year they've recruited and got in the transfer portal an ACC transfer quarterback. And Sports and Beat says, I think we're mainly going to be losing players just due to graduation and draft. Yeah, there's always a graduation and the draft, and now with the portal, you have the portal. And I've heard some coaches come out and say that nowadays with the portal, it's hard to coach the way you want to because some of these kids are so thin skinned now that if you go to them and try to coach them, make them better, they'll just pout and say, well, I'll just transfer them. So you have to be careful because you want to coach them and let them know they can't get by with it. But then when you try to coach them, they pout and they sulk and they transfer. So it is really good when you see a program like Clemson. Of course, I'm going to use Clemson because they're my team. So they're the team that I follow the most, obviously. So they're the team that I know the most about, obviously. But they have Troy Stellato transferring, and they'll have two or three others, and that'll probably be about it. But it's good to see that because a lot of these teams every year they have 14 or 15 players that transfer, and Clemson will have 4 or 5. So it just goes to show you that the way that Dabo is on camera is the way Dabo is behind the scenes. Otherwise, you would have players transferring left and right. And no matter what kind of season they have, their players stick around. Just like a few years back when they had 6 consecutive playoff teams and that ended, and they played Iowa State in, I want to say, the Pop Tarts Bowl, but I'm not sure. But in this day and time of players sitting out bowl games, they played in that bowl after making the playoffs 6 straight years, and not one player for Clemson came out and said, well, it's not a playoff game, so I'm not going to play. Everybody on the roster that was not out due to injury played in that game. Every other school in America, especially now, if they miss the playoffs, they play in their bowl game, half their starters will say, I'm not going to play. I'll sit out, and nobody bats an eye. But at Clemson, despite the record, despite what bowl they go to, their players almost always stick around, and their players almost always play in the bowl game. And Sports and Beats, you're an LSU fan, and your favorite brunette is also an LSU fan. But Sports and Beats, you like LSU and Penn State and SMU, and I believe that brunette there only likes LSU. So you and her can get back on here next time we go live and tune in and talk some LSU football. But let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. A lion would never play golf, but a tiger would. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of three. Tell your friends and family how much you love them.